The political climate has actually, what is done, like I be speaking to some people who obviously are African because they're black, um, and then they are actually trying to find out, I think there's an awakening to find out where you're from and try and attach to, like reconnect with your culture. And in a way, like when I speak to some people, it's because there's a journey to find where you're from, because it's like, okay, if these people don't accept me here, I'm just gonna go back home. And African governments, some African governments are actually, spearheading initiatives to attract the African diaspora back home. For instance, we had a Year of Return. I see Abdul there with Afrochella, Dirty Rave, of course. Yeah, I had to say Dirty Rave again. But basically, what I mean is, you see people actually, there's like, I've met people who are going back home to connect to business, like they want to buy property, they want to buy land. And so I feel, back to his first question, in some way, yes, the political climate has sort of like, in a way, kind of encouraged people to look back home. So that being said, I just wanted to say that. And then secondly, like I remember this guy, my first tour in 2016, not a proper tour, he didn't even want to pay me $5,000. Actually, he was trying to pay me $2,000. I remember vividly. No, but this is what I'm. Yeah, but what I'm trying to bring out real quickly is that, in fairness, like the truth is, the economic viability of the genre is increasing day by day, and that's because some people are making sacrifices to go into proper venues, and then technology, like he said, technology is on the increase back on the continent, and that's what is going to drive the actual economic viability of the genre. Because if we look at things like K-pop, if we think of urbano music and all of that, what happens is when the continent and when a culture suddenly gets online, it interprets in numbers, and the truth is, is businesses at the end of the day. So when people start seeing a record having 300 million streams, or when people start seeing suddenly a K-pop band is coming to America and doing stadiums, it's not rocket science, it's just straight up, there's something there, and then, the brands and we all know the economics of that. So I think over the years, like over the past 3-4 years, we've only seen it's been a constant increase. And the more Africa connects to the internet, I anticipate in the next 5-6 years, cost of going online across Africa is going to drop, hopefully guided by policy. And also, data penetration is going to increase, as more kids will be able to afford handsets that could take them online, and they're going to be able to afford going online. And then we're going to actually see the economic viability just skyrocket. So it's only going to increase, and technology is playing a big role in introducing the genre to people. Yeah, thank you. I'm Nigerian, but I feel, I don't know, but I feel it's like a calling for me to identify with Africa as a continent, especially, multiple countries. Because when I tour these countries, when I land, I really don't feel like I'm in a new country. I feel like I'm at home. And the issues I face as a Nigerian kid is almost the same issues a Ghanaian kid is facing, a kid from Mali. And so when I speak and I represent the continent, and I can't help it. Like, that's who I am, Having said that, having said that, it was never the plan to do music. I went to study mechanical engineering, and really just because all my uncles who had money were engineers, so from a very early age, I just wanted financial independence, and I thought the quickest route and the most sure route to, the most certain route to financial independence was becoming an engineer and working for Schlumberger, Shell, NNPC, blah, blah, blah. And so that was my move. So in the that's always been the goal for me, financial independence, you know. And while studying at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana, I realized that, you know, that Nigerians will party, they will have their own parties, and it will be only Nigerians. And Ghanaians will have their own party, and it will be only Ghanaians. And you know, there were not a lot of parties because everybody was studying. And so I went back to Nigeria and I saw my friend from high school, and he was driving a Toyota Corolla S. And that was a big deal to me. And I was like, how did you afford this? Did your dad buy it for you? And he's like, no, I throw parties. And I made money and I bought it. And so I went back to Ghana and I started throwing parties. And I would book, you know, and I would book a Ghanaian DJ and a Nigerian DJ. And I would go to the hottest Nigerian girls and the hottest Ghanaian girls and bring them into one place, and we started having the biggest parties. And that's how come I met my manager, just throwing parties. And we would go on, from throwing parties, we'll start doing concerts. So we'll book the likes of Davido, Burna Boy, Wande Cole, Sarkodie, you know, and the list goes on. And at this time, I never, like if you had told me I would be an artist, I'd have said, God forbid. You know, and it was majorly cost. I knew how much I was paying the artist. For me, it was never about the flash and the TV. And I remember my uncle one day taking me on a ride, and we were at Ikoyi. This is a highbrow area in Lagos. And he's like, how many musicians do you know that have houses on this street? And I was like, I don't think any. He's like, how many musicians are paying school fees for people in your school? I was like, none. He's like, so you see, you're doing parties. Don't go and get deviated and think you want to be a musician. You know, so for me, it was not economically viable at the time, but as fate will have it, when I was doing my master's, when I finished my thesis so quickly, I had so much time, and I would get into the studio and release my first mixtape, About to Blow, that had Bankulais, which was kind of like, it started creating a cult history, a cult following for me. And I remember having my first show booking January of 2016, to go to London and play 5 shows for $2,000 a show. And I thought it was a joke, you know, because I was like, who's gonna pay me $2,000 per show? So five shows, that's $10,000. Like, and I had my startup, I had gotten VC funding. It's like, okay, maybe I take a holiday and just go make this money. But when I went there, I found out how stupid I was, because all the venues were full, and I felt like I was shortchanged, because if I could calculate how many people paid £20, you know. But to fast track, what I basically done was bring the whole mindset of having a VC-funded company, a startup, and I just looked at myself. I remember 2016, in March, I took a loan from my VC. I took a £10,000 loan from my VC, and it was a convertible loan that would convert in more equity of my business, my tech startup. So it was £10,000. And I used it to book. So I booked my venue. I actually went straight to the O2 and booked the O2. I think it was Kentish Town. And that was only because I knew I had 300,000 listeners in London from my back end. And I knew there was no way I wouldn't have 10% of the listeners come watch me at a show. And so I booked a venue of, I think it's 2,500, because I knew they would come. So it was data-oriented touring, you know, and I did the same thing across. And by the way, I paid him in 2 months, and till today he tells me, damn, I should have just gotten equity in you as Mr. Eazi, maybe 20% in. You know, because if he had done that, this is more than 50x now, you know. It was maybe like, I don't know, maybe the Regos can tell. 10% is probably worth a couple millions now. You know, and for me, that was the mindset. And I've always thought African music is going to blow up in 6 years' time. I don't think it's now. I don't think we're scratching the surface. And that's why it's beautiful for me to come and speak to people like yourselves here to basically really understand that right now, this is the next decade is going to be about content. And so content, African content especially, is crude, is more than crude. And if you could look at me as an artist 4 years ago, as a startup, imagine a startup. How many startups, you know, when we do pitches, we say at the end of year one, we'll do 1 million in revenue, we could conquer 1% of the market share, blah, blah, blah. If you look at an African artist in that sense as a startup, and you find a way to tweak the model and invest in an African artist as a startup, you're going to see it in 3 years. 3 years is too short. And so that's what motivated emPawa Africa for me. Because I'd come to a point in 2018 when I just thought, is this what this is going to be about? I don't want to be touring like this all my life. It's boring. For me, it's boring. Like, okay, yeah, it can get bigger, but I was thinking of how to, you know, create something bigger than that. And I've been funding videos for artists as a CSR. And then I just thought of how to merge, you know, this whole startup, the idea of African artists as startups, and the idea of a financier as a VC, and see how that will work. So in 2018 November, we launched emPawa Africa. We gave grants to 100 artists from 17 African countries, $3,000 grants each. And in the process, we began to find out that these kids didn't have access to recording. So we started setting up mobile studios. We started finding out that these kids could not shoot their videos even if you gave them the cash. So we started finding directors, new directors to experiment with. And in the end, we ended up building the entire system. So now we have emPawa distribution, publishing, live, management, digital marketing, the entire ecosystem just out of that. And we picked the best 10, the best performing 10, and we took them to a space, just like the incubator I had been in for 4 weeks, where we taught them music business, marketing, media training, and they got to record with everybody I had access to. We flew down Diplo, lots of producers from across the world. And then we invested in two. Jadorobi, for that funding, like that seed funding maybe, in two. And one of them is Joe Boy, who's basically blown up across the continent, and Jadorobi from Ghana, basically proving the theory that you could actually invest in an African artist as from the beginning, a seed funding. And right now I'm raising a $20 million fund to invest in African content, not artists, actually the content, to invest in content as assets. So for a lot of people sitting here, there's like so much opportunity if you look behind, if you go beyond what you're seeing on YouTube and say, someone like my good friend here, he's touring some of the best artists out of Africa, and he has enough data to say, I want to give a Burna Boy $500 or $1 million in cash. And then for that, I keep 20% of the receipts as a fee, as a management fee. And then he recoups his $1 million from the 80%. If you calculate the ROI on that, it's silly. There's only a few businesses that can give you that. And that's for him. He deals with content, he deals with the music. And if you, say for instance, if you invest, like for instance, I put out a song 2 weeks ago, Balanga, and it cost me maybe $16,000. I already made more than that in 2 weeks. And that's just looking at it as content that just lives on streaming. So there's so much opportunity, and we could go on and on and on. And it's a beautiful time to invest in, African music and culture, because that's what we're exporting. And because it's new and it's fresh, this is like a good time to do it a different way. So that's my 2 cents, yeah.